Hello and welcome to 21st Century Vitalism. This here is a podcast exploring how we can best maintain a sense of energy, inspiration, and wakefulness while navigating the uncertain conditions of the modern age. My name is Brett Kane. I'm going to be your host on this journey, and in order to do this, we're going to be having a multidisciplinary conversation with a wide variety of speakers from all over the world. This typically includes spiritual teachers, somatic therapists, artists, activists, environmentalists, pretty much anyone who I feel is not only talking the talk, but walking the walk. And today's episode is no different. We're going to be joined by one of my favorite people, Susan Piver. She's an author, a Buddhist teacher, and the founder of the Open Heart Project, which is an online Dharma community that you can join right after this episode if you so choose. For this episode, we're going to be sitting down and talking about her newest book, Inexplicable Joy, which is a little handy manual on the Buddhist Heart Sutra. For those of you who have not heard of this or plugged into Buddhism at all, this is maybe one of the most central texts that kind of transcends any specific school or tradition and is considered the most pith of all of the instructions that comes from this tradition. So it is very important. It's chanted all around the world, and we will get into the specifics of what it is, how it's practiced, what its relevance is. But I do think that it is very helpful to hear it, especially as we are about to get into some of the specifics. So before we really dive into this conversation, I wanted to take a moment and chant it for you. It is only about 4 to 5 minutes. And during this course, you can kind of sit back and just allow the words to kind of wash over you. I will say up front, if you are unfamiliar with this kind of practice, a lot of this might not make sense. And that is okay. You know, it doesn't really matter if you understand every one of the words. We will actually go into some of the definitions during this conversation. So that's what we're going to be exploring today. So before we get into the formal chanting practice, I will say if you want to support Susan, head on over to openheartproject.com and check out some of her online offerings. She also has links to all of her amazing books on there. She really is a fantastic author that can really help you deepen your understanding of some of this kind of obscure stuff. Beyond that, if you want to support this show, you can head on over to patreon.com/21st Century Vitalism and consider becoming a patron. If you don't want to do the monthly thing, that's okay. I also have Venmo at Brett-Kane-1. Any and all donations help me keep the wheels greased and the vehicle of this show moving forward. If money isn't an option, that is totally okay. You can also subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook. Any and all of those platforms will help you stay plugged into what's going on over here and me plugged into who's paying attention. So without further ado, here is the Heart Sutra and Susan Piver. Thus have I heard once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of Bodhisattvas. At the time the Blessed One entered the Samadhi that expresses the Dharma, called profound illumination, and at the same time noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound prajna paramita, saw in this way. He saw the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Then through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound prajna paramita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound prajna paramita should see in this way, seeing the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form, emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics, there is no birth and no cessation, there is no impurity and no purity, there is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no I dhatu, up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance, up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the Bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the 3 times by means of prajnaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable true complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of prajnaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering, should be known as truth, since there is no deception. The prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way: Om gate gate para samgate bodhi swaha. The Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family, thus it is, O son of noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound prajnaparamita, just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly and the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Okay, Susan, so the camera is going now, so I just want to start by saying thank you so much for joining me, and also you were the first guest that I've had on for 3 episodes, so I guess
Oh,
congratulations. I don't know if that's the word, but yeah, welcome
oh,
back.
I think so. Well, thank you. I'm proud of that. That's great to
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, it's a
Thanks. It's good to
milestone.
be back.
Good, I'm glad to hear it. So, I have been going through your book, like I was just saying before the recording, Inexplicable Joy. And it was really interesting for me because this was something I actually wanted to talk to you about. I had you in the back of my mind for most of last year and timing and stuff, but it's about the Heart Sutra, which I actually also learned with you and David. And, we did that 6-week course. And it's something that is near and dear to my heart, no pun intended. It is the only time I've actually really connected with a kind of recitation practice, if that's what you want to call it. And there's just so much here, so I would love to dive in, but I can also acknowledge that a lot of people might not have ever heard of the Heart Sutra. So I think maybe a good ground zero to start with is just what exactly is the Heart Sutra? What's a sutra? And, how did you find your way to this really auspicious text?
Yeah, yeah. Those are good places to start. So, sutra refers in Buddhism anyway to teachings given by the Buddha. So, if you hear Heart Sutra or Lotus Sutra or Diamond Sutra, they refer to teachings directly attributable to the historic Buddha. And the Heart Sutra is one of the central texts in all of Buddhism, whatever style you practice in or whatever the origin stories are of that school of Buddhism. The Heart Sutra is relevant. And in some traditions, it's the central sutra or one of the central sutras. For example, in the Zen tradition, there is tremendous emphasis on the Heart Sutra as well as other sutras. And in Sanskrit, the word is Prajnaparamita, the Prajnaparamita Sutra. Prajna means wisdom, and paramita means transcendent. So it is the ultimate wisdom. And the full sutra is said to be like 100,000 lines long. That's pretty darn long.
Yeah.
And then there's another version that's around 8,000 lines. And the one that I write about in this book is 43 lines long. And that is easier.
Much more manageable.
Much more manageable. Yes, that's the right word. And the whole Heart Sutra, as I was taught, can also be expressed in one syllable, 0 lines, 1 syllable, which is that is equally as accurate as the full 100,000 lines. And in the heart here doesn't mean emotion. It means pith. This is the pith. This goes right to the heart. There is no fooling around. This is it.
Yeah, amazing. I'm excited to kind of get, there's so many questions about specific lines within there, but I'm curious about how you yourself found your way to this particular thing. I mean, this is something that, I don't want to speak for you, but it seems very resonant for you.
It's very resonant for me. And I've been a practitioner for close to 35 years, a really long time. And the person who volunteered to teach me to meditate, who I didn't really know, I'd only met him once. When I went to learn meditation from him, we talked about the practice a little bit, and he said, okay, but before we sit, let's say this together. And he gave me a piece of paper, and on it was this version of the Heart Sutra. And he said, just skip over the words you can't pronounce, and then we'll meditate. So before I ever learned how to meditate, I chanted the Heart Sutra. So I didn't know why, and I didn't realize how central it would be over the ensuing decades. And so it has been.
Yeah. So with that, like, what was your first response? Because there's a lot of very compelling statements in this sutra. As somebody who hasn't even meditated, I guess, what was your first, like, what the hell was that?
Yeah, that was it. What the hell was that? I don't know how to pronounce many of these words. I don't know why we're saying them. I guess it means something, and I trust, for whatever reason, I trust this person, I trust this situation. So, okay, I'll give it a try. But I didn't understand it at all. And I would say decades later, I still don't understand it at all. But my love for it has deepened and continues to deepen.
Yeah, that's amazing. One of the things I think is so fascinating about sutras like this and the other ones is that, this comes from an oral tradition where this stuff was passed down from speaker to student without really writing it down. And what I found as I've engaged with this is it's a total package. You don't really even need to know much of anything else. It helps to know the words, but it itself is just this complete. It has a bow on it, and then it's able to kind of be delivered to somebody. So that's also why don't most of these start with like thus have I heard? Like what is the nature of that allows it? Why does it always start with that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This one and many other sutra or texts start with thus have I heard, because they weren't written down. So someone's saying, this is what I heard. So to me, I love that because it immediately makes me think, well, if I was talking to someone, they said, I want to tell you something really important. This is what I heard. I'd be like, okay, this is what you heard. What am I going to hear? And that is a very useful question when it comes to any spiritual teaching is not what did someone else hear, but what do I hear? And in this case, the I is thought to be one of the Buddha's closest students named Ananda, who often acted as the Buddha's secretary. And Ananda was renowned for his extraordinary memory. So, thus have I heard, in this case, means, okay, well, but who knows? Maybe it was having a bad day. So, I should really pay very close attention in all cases.
Yeah. Man, the Buddha would have been in bad luck if it were me because my memory is not good. I would have been screwing it up. Is there a chance that like the game of telephone over the ages has kind of like morphed this text? And it's just a really interesting thing that it lands to us in the form that it does, and it is immediately so just confronting, and it still has so much charge to it. And it's like, well, it's probably changed a little bit at least.
Yeah, and translated from this language to that language and this culture to that culture. And, it's a case where you just got to really trust the translators. Uh, and and also the integrity of the text itself, that it conceivably hangs together through all of this telephone. And if you read different translations, because there are many, I've only, I haven't read a bunch, but I've read maybe a half a dozen, all in English, of course. Uh, there are little words that are different here and there, but it's really not that different. So that is kind of reassuring,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think.
yeah. Well, and I mean, at least my experience, and I've really just stuck with the one that is pretty much word for word the one that you wrote about in your book. I don't know, like, does it almost matter as much what exactly is being said? Because I have such it's an experience. Like, I read through it and I don't know if it's just my mind meeting it where it's at, but I go through, like, by the end of it, there's a shift in my energy. There's a shift in the quality of my mind that really sets me up for meditation very well. But I
Uh-huh.
read it even before this, and I could just feel this kind of like whoosh, this kind of emptying out. And, I just wonder how much of that has to do with the particular order of words, how much of it is my mind and my relationship with it.
Uh-huh.
It's just really interesting. It really is like a space that you inhabit, was kind of my
Yeah.
experience.
That's a really good way of saying it. And the meaning, I just lost my camera, it's back.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
The meaning can be conveyed in three ways. And what the words mean is just one of the ways. The sound of the words is the second way. So that sort of leads one to think that whether this word is translated that way or this way in this particular text, there's something, as you allude, to the cadence, the integrity, the fullness of the text itself that is independent of the words, reliant on the words too. But so the meaning of the words, the sound of the words, and the environment into which it is spoken or in which you sit seems to change when you chant this, uh, it seems. So those three things together can convey the meaning. And what you're describing is very much along those lines, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's very different. So I've kind of come from a little bit of a yogic background and that kind of view where I've been a part of a few kirtans and different kinds of chants that are a lot more musical. And the way that the Buddhist chants that I've partaken in, I mean, there is this kind of like monotone cadence that I find to be, for me, uh, more potent. I don't really know why, but there's something
Mhm.
about it that even when I'm not, I'll think about a line from the sutra and immediately the next one comes and the next one comes, and it just like is this never-ending run-on sentence in a way
Uh-huh.
that
Uh-huh.
like has really like digs this groove, just the way that it was written, and it's just so distinct compared to some of the kirtans and stuff I've been a part of.
I I agree. I agree. And the monotone, I think, is a big part of it. I because as you have experienced, it's chanted, thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Raja Griha, etc. And why is that? Well, I think there's something kind of hypnotic, not in a manipulative sense. And it also takes it out of anyone's personal self-expression mode. So I might say it this way, you might say it that way, but that's all gone. And it's also chanted like a river flowing. So you don't stop at the end of a sentence. You don't, pause when there's a comma. You just keep rolling. And there's something about that keep rolling that is powerful.
Yeah. As you're saying that, I thought, I think normally when we speak, we place a lot of special emphasis on words that we want to kind of accentuate. And this style of delivery doesn't really allow that personal flair. And I'm wondering if that's probably a part of what made this kind of last through the centuries and have that kind of integrity is, yeah, you really have to get rid of your own kind of personal, like, yeah, but I really like the part where he says, no, mine, datu. There's no sort of like, thing that you're injecting into, and it really kind of forces you to meet it where it's at.
It takes out the phrasing
Yeah,
that could contribute to the meaning. So I
yeah,
agree with you completely.
yeah, yeah. So I feel like we kind of explored a little bit of kind of where mantra kind of comes into this, but I think diving into it a little bit could reveal some important things. So I think like setting the space for the Heart Sutra. This is something that I've thought about is like why is it so important? Why did it get baked in kind of like the set and the setting? I mean, it seems like the meat of it is really like the pithy with like Avalokiteshvara kind of saying like there's no this, no that. To me, that's like the part that I'm like, yeah, let's get to there. But then I always have to do the Vulture Peak Mountain and all of that. Why is that kind of baked in? And I guess if you could kind of outline that.
Yeah, I don't really know. But I guess it's like if you started a story without once upon a time, you might be like, wait, when did this happen? Or
Yeah.
what else do I need to know before I jump in here? So it sets the scene, just as you say, Vulture Peak Mountain. And then to me, the pith part is not just with Avalokiteshvara saying no this, no that. It's right in the first stanza where it says, the Buddha entered the samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the five skandhas to be empty of nature, etc. So there's something about that. Then the Buddha doesn't say anything. It's samadhi, absorption. But somehow it, I think, or I imagine that the whole teaching arose from that samadhi. And it wasn't just Avalokiteshvara saying, hey, I saw the five skandhas are empty of nature. It's the Buddha entered the samadhi, Avalokiteshvara laid it out, the Buddha exited samadhi and said, good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So somehow those things are of a piece. And
Mm.
why? I mean, I don't know. You could use your imagination. I'm using mine. But there's something about the profound realization and state of absorption of the Buddha or anyone that you might meet who is profoundly awake. It gives rise to wisdom in your mind.
Mm.
So
Oh,
my guess is something like that.
yeah, that's fascinating. So, I mean, we've already said a few words that some people might not be totally hip to, so there's this figure, Avalokiteshvara, whose name I couldn't pronounce properly for probably 2 years.
Yeah, me
So
too.
I'm proud of myself.
You should be.
But, who is this figure? And I guess what is his relationship to the Buddha?
Mhm.
He's kind of speaking for him, I mean, in a way.
Well, he's saying this is what I saw. Avalokiteshvara was one of the Buddha's closest students. So I guess maybe it was a real person. But Avalokiteshvara is also considered currently or in recent history, the Bodhisattva of compassion, I think called Chenrezig in Tibetan. But Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion. So this sutra is about compassion. If Avalokiteshvara is speaking, it's like compassion is giving you a teaching.
Wow. So, with what he is saying, you had mentioned that there are no skandhas. Again, I think skandha might need to be broken down for certain people, but yeah, how does that kind of give rise to compassion? I guess that's a two-part question. What the heck is a skandha? And
Yeah.
if there's none of them, how does that kind of birth compassion?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So skanda means heap, Heap, and I'm sure there are it's translated in other ways, but basically it means five skandhas that you think are you, but they aren't. And the five skandhas are form, I get I say them in order.
Is
Give
it
me a
is it
second. Form, perception, formation, consciousness,
in feeling?
and which was the other one?
Feeling.
Feeling. Form, feeling, perception, formation, consciousness.
Yeah.
Those are things that we think are real, and
Hmm.
they really seem real. But in this teaching, they're called illusory. They're not quite the whole truth, but they give rise to this whole matrix of reality that one might question. So the thing starts out saying it's not what you think it is.
Yeah.
And to your next question, how does that relate to compassion? Well, compassion, and I don't understand it, so I'll just say that straight up.
Love it.
But it two forms. Relative compassion is the first way compassion manifests in the relative world, as kindness, as love, as thoughtfulness, as presence, as doesn't just mean being nice. Sometimes the compassionate thing is to be angry. So it just means acting on behalf of others. And but then the second form is absolute compassion, which has something to do with complete recognition of oneness. So now you know why I can't explain it, because I don't understand it. Because you can't step outside of it and explain it at the same time. But if you were to live in that recognition that you are in your little rectangle on screen and I'm in mine, but really there's no difference, then all that would be left would be compassion, because whatever I do is affecting me too. I would not want to be unkind to you. I mean, that's a really silly way of saying it, but
Yeah, I mean, it might seem silly, but it's also like it is very profound, and I think it's something that a lot of people really strive to experience, but it is really tricky. I feel like in the spiritual community, like virtually speaking, a lot of people like we're all one, and it's kind of this like bumper sticker at this point. But to be able to actually have that experience in a way that is sustainable is really tricky. So, with like the Heart Sutra saying that the ability to bring about that oneness, we have to be able to see clearly that these skandhas, these elements of ourselves, are actually not as they appear to be. And I think that to me is one of the biggest challenges that Buddhism really has brought to the world, is to be able to break down our experience and actually point out how things are not what they conventionally seem. And I think most people, when they meet that, it's really hard.
it's
It's so
impossible.
hard. It really seems to be.
It's
You know,
impossible because you're never going, one will never grasp it through intellect or analysis. It's more likely, according to actual wisdom masters, to be attained through letting go. And maybe that's one reason that the Heart Sutra says, let go of this, let go of that, let go of the other thing. No eye, no ear, no nose, whatever it is. No, it's not, it does not exist on its own. And I know the bumper stickers, we are all one. I mean, that just makes me mad actually, because it's bullshit.
yeah.
And in order to say that, you have to separate yourself from the oneness. So you've already sort of stepped on your own foot. But it's not about sweetness and light. And my understanding, quite limited, is that in order to dwell in recognition of that oneness, you dissolve. Whoever it is that you think Brett is, whoever I think Susan is, goes away.
Yeah.
That's terrifying.
Yeah. And it's even interesting, I think there's, a pop culture response where it's like, yeah, you have to dissolve the ego. And, I think a lot of people kind of laud that as like a really great accomplishment. But I think even the moment, as you just said, like Brett dissolves, Susan dissolves, it's like, well, who is it that's doing the dissolving? Like, who is it that's saying that's still left? And it's like, well, it kind of points to it's not totally dissolved, or is it
Exactly.
possible that the in the dissolution there is still like a self-referential organizing principle, or is that
Yes,
gone?
it's gone. I guess. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
anyone who says you should let your ego dissolve, that's their ego talking.
Hmm.
And if you say it to yourself, you shouldn't have so much ego, that's your ego talking. If you were to say, I think I let go of my ego, that is your ego. So it's much more nuanced and sophisticated than that. That is a very unnuanced, unsophisticated way to look at it, I would say. And usually a result of uh, somebody not wanting you to be upset about something. Oh, you have
Yeah.
to. If only you didn't have so much ego, or if only you weren't so attached. That makes me really mad, because what I want to say right away is, why are you attached to non-attachment? Game over. What else? What else you got?
Yeah, it's like I'm stomping on your foot, but like there's nobody there, so it's fine.
That's right. Yeah. So it shouldn't hurt.
Yeah. So I'm wondering with your, and this will be a very imperfect question and answer, I'm sure, but with your experience of, chanting something like no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, uh, most people are like, uh,
It's right here.
there's something very immediate about the relative reality of these things. And I guess as you have developed this relationship with the sutra, how do you kind of interpret that? And have you had an experience where there is genuinely no ear or eyes, or like after spending this much time with it, have you noticed any shift in your relationship to those elements of experience?
No, I haven't. But I have noticed other things. So yeah, here's my nose, here's my ear, all of that. I'm with you. Um, but I trust the Heart Sutra somehow, and that by saying it, I'm reminding myself of something important every that I do not understand right now.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I don't think it would ever happen that I would go, oh, look, my nose isn't there.
Got your
I
nose.
don't think
Yeah.
that's how it's going to work. It's all still there. But is it is it an accurate indicator of reality? I don't know. These are the most ultimately I don't know what the right word is, profound spiritual questions.
Yeah.
And as such, they will not be answered by me making drawing a line down a piece of paper and going, pros, I have a nose. Con, I don't have a nose.
Yeah.
And then seeing what I
Yeah.
come out with. It's not going to work
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So you had mentioned kind of trusting the Heart Sutra, and to me, like that level of trust, there's almost a practice in that as well, right? Like there's something about allowing yourself to kind of bow to this kind of like greater understanding that to me, because I also would say that I have the same relationship to it, and I found that it is something that I've had to kind of like cultivate through practice. But I guess how would you describe the importance of trust, or I don't know if devotion would be another word, or faith, or how has that kind of weaved its way through your practice?
Well, I've noticed it. I have not tried to prove it. It's like a relationship. How do you know if someone's trustworthy? Well, you spend time together and you see that they are, but you don't decide in advance. So with the Heart Sutra, my trust comes from in retrospect. It was the first thing I ever was taught on the spiritual path as a Buddhist. That's meaningful to me. Why? I don't know, but that's a fact. Second, I have been chanting it almost every day for over 30 years, and I have noticed that it takes up more and more real estate in my mind in a weird way. Like I'll be walking along and a line will pop into my head. I'm not saying that means something or anything like that, but my mind and the Heart Sutra continue to mesh. I'm not saying it feels good or I've learned any spiritual lessons. I don't know what it means. But I do notice that the relationship and the connection continues to strengthen on its own. And when I have talked to my own meditation teacher, because I've had the same meditation teacher for all this time, the person who taught me to meditate and suggested I chant the Heart Sutra, that's still my meditation teacher. It's important to him. And so it's important to me. I can't really say much more than that about it. But there was one moment not long ago, maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago, where I was talking to him about something that was causing me pain, and I can't remember what it was. And he said, well, what's the mantra that calms all suffering? I'm like, I don't know. And then, oh, it's right there in the
Yeah.
Heart Sutra.
It's
The
like you
mantra that
chant it
calms
every
all
day.
suffering
Yeah.
should be known as truth, since there's no deception. I'm like, oh, I never really put that together. So then I started using it when I was suffering and offering it in my heart to other people who I saw were suffering. And I don't know if it didn't fix anything, but it just seems to be more and more in play in my practice. I don't know. How about you? Do you trust it? Or if so, why? If not, why?
Yeah. I think that there is kind of an auspiciousness to it. With me and Buddhism in general, it's just kind of after spiritually searching in so many kind of different nooks and crannies, settling in, learning with David and all the people that he's introduced me to. Yeah, there was something really special. It was pretty early in my practice. It wasn't the first thing I did, but that 6 weeks spending with it and the way that it was framed, I mean, from you as well, it felt very charged. It felt very resonant. And I feel like I do have just kind of an experiential quality of it. Whereas when I chant it and like after, there's something almost physiological. Like I feel like an emptying out, and I don't totally understand it, but it's very unique to this sutra. And I don't chant it every day, but it is kind of always in the back of my mind at a certain point. It's like this, and then like the sadhana of Mahamudra still will also, it like perfumes my experience. And every now and again, I've also been leaning into the mantra, which we can talk about in a little bit here. But yeah, there's just a way. I love I don't know if you said it in your book or where I just read it, but perfuming just your experience with just this. It's an energy. It's like just something that I can't explain.
I get it. I did. It is the last line of the book. May the Heart Sutra perfume your experience, or something like that. But I did not make up that way of phrasing it. I've read it in other texts. The use of the word perfume as how a text or a teaching could appear in your life. It's not like carved in stone or a textbook or a guidebook, but it perfumes the environment. And I think that's a beautiful way of saying it.
Yeah, I love that. I also find it just very compelling because I mean, Buddhism is there's an intellectual component. There's a lot of like critical thinking.
Sure.
You're learning all these lists and all these things, and something about the Heart Sutra. And again, it really is like the entire Buddhist path, but it's almost it presents it by negating it,
Hmm.
and that to me is also makes me feel more faith in the path that it's able to kind of just be like, also everything that you've been learning, it's gone. That to me, I think most traditions are like, this is the way, like this is the truth. You can't dispute it. And this one is just kind of like, doesn't matter.
Yeah,
And that to
good
me
about that.
also, Yeah. Yeah. Which I guess is why they called it the Heart Attack Sutra, because some of the people who received it had heart attacks.
That's
Which,
a great book on the Heart Sutra. It's called the Heart Attack Sutra because
yeah.
according to the lore, when people were like, "Hey, everything you've been doing your whole life, it's not real," they just expired. They had heart
Yeah.
attacks.
Yeah.
I hope that's not
So
true.
yeah, hopefully not. But I think as soon as people heard that there's a mantra that calms all suffering, I'm sure they're like, "Yo, I got to get some of that."
I know.
So that's a pretty big statement. So what is the mantra, if you don't mind me asking you?
The mantra that calms all suffering is Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhi Svaha. So Om is, I'm sure everybody's chanted Om in a yoga class or whatever, but it's also the seed syllable of compassion, therefore of Avalokiteshvara. So it's just saying compassion. That's the context here. Gate means beyond. Gate, repeated. Paragate, really gone beyond. Parasamgate, I've gone so far beyond that I've arrived at the other shore. Bodhi, awake. Svaha means like so be it, or
Yeah.
so it means beyond, beyond, really gone beyond, totally gone beyond, awake, boom, booyah.
Booyah. Yeah. And I think you had mentioned it in yours that like the Bodhisvaha, there was a celebratory quality to that too, right?
Yeah,
It's kind of like a hallelujah.
yeah, it can be a hallelujah. And uh, Kazuaki Tanahashi sensei, I hope I did not butcher that name, a wonderful calligrapher and great scholar of the Heart Sutra, among many other things, wrote a book on the Heart Sutra. Uh, it's a very vast compendium of teachings on the Heart Sutra. It's wonderful. And he translates Svaha as joy.
So, with this mantra, I'm trying to remember when I first heard it, what the kind of instruction was. I could be butchering it, but I thought I had heard that you really only need to say it the one time, right? Is this something that you can kind of extract the mantra out of the rest of it and then just kind of like carry that with you? Or do you need to do the entire Heart Sutra in order to have that
No,
accessible?
I think a la carte can work.
Okay, love that. Yeah,
But the whole thing is important.
yeah,
But sometimes you don't have time, or sometimes you just walk along and something happens and you're sad. So you could absolutely chant the mantra anytime you want.
amazing. So, I really wanted to also dedicate a part of this conversation to exploring how this can interface with our modern lives. So I think like we have our spiritual practices, and if we're bringing this one on, we have a lot of aspects of life right now that are kind of challenging, that are very uncertain. And I'm curious with your experience, starting with maybe like livelihood, creativity, what has been your experience of how this has affected, say, your writing or just kind of your output? Is there any sort of relationship that you can draw between these two things of everything is actually empty and I'm
Mm.
also a creative, and where does that come from?
Mm. Mhm. Hmm. I don't think so. Maybe there is some connection, but I don't know what it is. And I, if I thought there was, I might not trust it because
Yeah,
it's always in motion.
yeah,
So there's not like, oh, this means that, and A equals B. And I just, the older I get and the more I practice, the more I see that those, for me, as a very I mean, I'm not saying I'm stupid or anything like that, but I'm not an academic. I'm not an intellectual. I don't hold with that way of looking at things for
yeah,
myself, about myself.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I notice from my experience, and I guess my very fledgling understanding of emptiness, which again is just a shot in the dark, and I totally own that pretty much every time I talk about it. I think for me, what it has helped a lot with is whenever I'm feeling like self conscious or maybe like insecure, there is something that I'm able to kind of draw on from this sense of like, open space kind of quality that this makes me feel. And again, that's very unreliable too, because it's always changing. But, right before I sit down to do a podcast or something, I might have a thought like, wow, this person's like really brilliant. I really want to like impress them, or I want to do this and I won't be able to do that. And then I just kind of like, wait, and like tap into it in a way where it's like, actually, like this could go any direction, including one that's like really positive. And just like remembering that kind of lack of substantiality with everything actually for me has allowed like a really great sense of kind of creativity to kind of emerge, and like we are co-creating this and
Uh-huh.
it could really go any direction.
Uh-huh. That's lovely. That makes sense to me. That's really nice.
Yeah, but again, it's definitely not reliable in the moment that I try to bottle it up, and it even kind of felt like a little wrong to articulate it in that way, because yeah, there's also times where I'm totally confident that it goes in the other direction.
Sure.
So yeah.
That's one, I mean, the Dharma will always sort of snap back once you think you understand it.
Yeah.
It sort of snaps back a little bit when you think, well, maybe I understand a little bit, but there's
Yeah.
definitely more to understand.
Another element that, as I'm somebody who is practicing this and kind of engaging with this material, and I'm somebody who civically is quite aware of just kind of what's happening in the world, I think that for me, there's been a really powerful intersection between those two things, as well as I'm kind of hurting with just what's happening, in our country and the
Hmm.
world at large, and the uncertainty of that, I think has actually made my relationship to this material kind of more profound, in terms of watching all of the comfortable reference points of reality that have been there, which have
Hmm.
seemed very stable. Things will fluctuate, but there's always been kind of guardrails of what you can expect. And
Hmm.
now it's like, oh, there aren't any guardrails.
That's right.
And I've just noticed that the more that I've engaged with something like this, it's helped me be not comfortable in a way, but more like, oh, I can actually recognize the lack of guardrails and the lack of like, oh, there's no ground right now. To me,
Yeah,
that has been the biggest thing in helping me kind of orient as I'm falling through the air. you
exactly.
know?
Me too. Me too. It doesn't feel good at all, but there's also a chance to loosen the constraints of conventional view, which is things are going to turn out this way or that way because they have in the past. Well, we don't have that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, when we're talking about like clear viewing and like this like nature of like absolute compassion, which was seeing the oneness. And I think a lot of people associate that with like something blissful or something transcendent. But what I love about Buddhism is the like the ultimate compassion. I mean, it's seeing suffering and it's seeing it with totally sober eyes, the pain that is going on. And right now, I think so many people are waking up in a way because we're all connecting to that. And there's, I think, opportunity there
Hmm.
that we might not have had.
I agree. I agree. It's painful to see, and who knows how it will turn out. But yeah, there's we have to look at things in a different way. Hopefully, that will be valuable. Some, you know, as things progress.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I guess that kind of brings me to just meditation in general. I mean, Heart Sutra has a support for meditation, but just the very act of sitting, I think is something that I try and touch up on, because it really is feels like the antidote so much. Not that it's going to necessarily fix anything, but in just kind of making our systems more resilient, and less flinching. So I guess what I would ask you is just how have you been doing in regards to meditation and just kind of watching the world unfold as it is? Has anything shifted for you there?
The thing that is really jumps out at me very clearly uh, is how much pain and suffering comes from constantly trying to figure out what's going on. And we have to think about it. I'm not saying otherwise. I'm not saying ignore at all. But there's so much noise and so much uncertainty and so much anger and fear, all very well placed. But the uh, capacity to retain agency over our attention is being chipped away at and worse. So that there's so many things just dropping into your world that want your attention. And many of those things want not just your attention, they want your heart. They want you to be upset, they want you to be angry, they want you to be hopeful, they want you to feel something. And when Donald Trump was elected again, I think like anyone with any sense would have feels, which is devastated. But I also felt like I'm not going on the ride. I went on the ride last time. I'm not going on the ride this time because it does not serve. So it seems like obviously I'm making this up, he wants everybody to be angry. He wants everybody to be upset. He wants everybody to pay attention to him. So I feel like, F you, I'm not. And I'm going to pay attention to what's going on in the world and to people in my world and to people who are suffering. But I'm not going to get lost in my emotional response to your insanity.
Yeah.
Because it will not do any good for anyone. So as a meditator, it seems really valuable to know how to direct your attention, not to ignore the things that are causing so much suffering, but so that when you do pay attention, you can do so from a place of feeling empowered rather than exhausted.
Yeah.
So that seems really important to me. And the most rebellious thing I think that one can do right now is recapture agency over one's attention, to use it skillfully.
So I'm curious, is there any precedent in Buddhism for the kind of force that we're facing right now? I mean, it's just such an interesting thing that you bring up, like the uh, deep desire for everybody's attention and for everybody to be angry and scared. It is just such a fascinating thing to me because I am so far removed from that. I'm like, actually, don't pay attention to me. Thank you. I guess, is there any precedent in the Buddhist cosmology for this kind of energy and like how to respond to it? Or is this, I just,
Well, I don't know, but I will tell you that in Buddhist cosmology, which I understand in an extremely limited way, there are 6 realms. And some people say these are actual places. Some people say they're psychological states or spiritual states. I'm sure we all can understand what they are, whether they're real, quote, real or not, unquote, I don't know. But the first realm is, I'll just talk about the first 3 because they're the only ones that matter right now. The God realm. It's the beings who live there have everything they want. Everything goes their way. They need something, it's there. They have no obstacles. They're young and beautiful. They can fly. They're psychic. Everything is great. It sounds good. But there's a downside. They have very long and painful death, and they have no opportunity to escape this samsaric existence. Because even though it's great, it's still samsara, because there's no impulse to study the Dharma or practice because everything's great. The second realm is called the jealous God realm. And these are people also, or beings with a lot of strength and power and resources, but they're upset that they're not gods. They're pissed off that they're only jealous gods. And they want what the other jealous gods have. So they're also called warring gods. There's nothing that is enough. So they're constantly battling to get more. And it doesn't matter how much they get, it will never be enough. And the third of the 6 is the human realm. That's where we are. And it's the good one. The jealous gods are not going to wake up and become enlightened because they're too busy trying to dominate samsara to transcend it. But we have the right ratio of ease, like we live somewhere and we have food. That's what is meant by ease. And suffering. We have loss and disappointment and so on. Those two things together compel us and enable us to study and practice. If everything was great, we wouldn't want to practice, because why? If everything was horrible, we couldn't. We would have no bandwidth. So, long-winded way of saying, I think we're witnessing a battle of the jealous gods. They want everything. They want to dominate. That's the only objective. It's not for the betterment. It's not, I don't know what it's for. They just want to dominate. And kind of doesn't matter what their belief system is. I mean, it does, of course, but there's just a battle of jealous gods that we're witnessing. And early on, I realized, correctly or incorrectly, I don't know, that human realm weapons will not work in the jealous god realm. Human realm weapons include things like logic, relationship skills, academia, activism, verbal prowess. They don't care. But those are the only weapons we have. But we cannot fight the jealous gods with those weapons. And we're not jealous gods. But what we can do is strengthen the human realm through these things, the weapons that we do have, and see what happens.
Well, it's a really interesting thing, kind of drawing on the six realms, in the center of the Bhava chakra, which is kind of where these are nestled within, is kind of like the three poisons. And, I think what's really fascinating is like where we're getting this like highest expression of greed, like passion, like this drawing in kind of energy, and also aggression too. But, like I feel like it really is just on full display shamelessly. And it's like, I genuinely feel like everybody has within their heart the possibility, if they fed those energies more than they do. And it really is like a great opportunity to see like where that actually can take you, whether or not you have the power. If you feed these things and that fire grows, what that becomes is pretty non-human in a way. There's something about it that takes over the organism, and you become this servant of this incessant hunger that ends up actually destroying your environment, and it destroys you and then closes you down from any sort of kind of reclamation. That I think we just have, everything right now in life feels so exaggerated. We really, whatever it is, you have the ability to see it in its fullest possible expression, and it's just, it kind of feels unique in human history to have access to be able to see it. Before it's like, oh, I hear in the other village there's a warlord that's doing this thing that's over there, but now it's like on your phone, you're like, oh wow,
Yeah.
here it is. There's something profound about that ability that I think could actually even sharpen our weapons in the human realm.
Hopefully.
Also dulls them.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think that is a good place to end it. Yeah, Susan, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me. This has been very illuminating, no pun intended, on what we're talking about here. So I do just want to give you a brief moment to kind of just share how people can kind of follow you and interact with what you have going on.
Thanks. And it's a pleasure to talk with you again. Thank you. My online community is called the Open Heart Project. So if you just go to openheartproject.com, there's all sorts of ways to practice together, and there's a free newsletter, and there's a Sangha, and that's the best way to stay in touch.
Wonderful. Yeah. And you have Inexplicable Joy, which is also available wherever people get books. So yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Susan. Really always a pleasure. And we will catch you next time.
Great to talk with you too.
Yeah. Take
Bye.
care. All right, everybody, that was the episode. Thank you so much for listening all the way through until the end. Once more, that was Susan Piver. You can pick up her book, Inexplicable Joy, wherever you buy your books. You can also head on over to the openheartproject.com to stay plugged in with her online offerings and get more of her books. If you want to support this show, head on over to patreon.com/21st Century Vitalism, or you can Venmo me at Brett-Kane-1. All of those things will help you help me keep this show running. If money's not an option, that's okay. You're also welcome to follow us on Instagram, subscribe on YouTube, or like us on Facebook. As always, thank you again so much. I really do make this show for you, those warriors who make it through till the end. All right, we'll catch you next time.